Gus Malzahn to Florida State.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can place a $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. The news broke yesterday before Florida played Florida State in Doak, and it caught me off guard, and I'm guessing that outside of some people with knowledge of the industry's agents and whatnot, not a whole lot of people probably knew, but Malzahn is going to Florida State. He's going to be the offensive coordinator for Norvell. He's leaving the UCF program. He was there from 2021 through this season, so 4 years. And I'm going to break down what he's going to bring for the coaching staff in terms of his stability, his ability to help fill out Florida State's coaching staff. We're going to talk about the transfer portal and all of his recruiting acumen, the places that he's been to recruit well, what he does normally, what he's looking for. But first, we're going to talk about what he has done as a play caller, his offensive style, and what he needs based on his history for Gus Malzahn to be successful in Tallahassee for the Seminoles. It's a very good coincidence that his style of play fits a lot of the same talents that even Bowden had all the way through Jimbo to today in terms of how Florida State recruits and recruits well. So let's get started with some basic background on him. Number one, this is a guy that's from the state of Arkansas. He came up through the high school ranks, ended up helping out at Arkansas as an assistant coach, moved up the ranks some more, ended up at Auburn. And in 2010, they had this guy there named Cam Newton. I was lucky enough to get to see him play in the Auburn versus LSU game that year. Injured in hair, but I knew that the offense was going to be predicated on the running game and all the different things that he did with Wildcat, etc. All of that stuff was present, and it was unique how many different formations and shifts, the different kinds of players that he would use in positions that a lot of teams may not. His ability to use the H-back, for instance, was really, really important. It helped Cam Newton win the Heisman and helped Auburn win a national title. All the little buttons that he could find to put on his desk, he wanted them. Gus likes to get fancy sometimes with his play calling. Sometimes it may not be needed, but that is who he is. And he will screen you to death. He will find different ways for his running backs to be successful. It is a very wide open offense, and he likes to put the pedal to the metal. Fast break offense. If he was a basketball coach, they would press and run. That's a way to look at this. He does everything through a running quarterback. There's no question, but he has had some passers. I'll get to that too. Important, though, for Malzahn's offense to be truly successful in his true bubble, in his true bag, he needs a quarterback that can be on the outside, head up with the other team's best tackler, and shake him so bad that he doesn't physically make contact. Like that's why, I guess, in a lot of ways, Cam Newton was so good. Even at 250 plus, he could do that. He was as unique a player as I ever watched live. But he also did it with the quarterback of 2013 that was a former defensive back at Georgia, went to JUCO, came to Auburn, and they almost beat Florida State, ironically, in the 2013 season to finish that year. He's had quarterbacks that can run. When he doesn't have a really good guy at picking out how to run the RPO and get the team in the right place, just like anybody else. You got to make post-snap reads and get all that stuff right. But he needs guys that can make that really tough decision, when to pull it, when to run it, and sometimes when to throw it. RPO, fast break offense, that's Gus Malzahn. So here are the stats that I just want to use. Like, they killed it in 2010. They had Cam Newton. I don't think that's a good idea to use those stats, but they were unbelievable in the clutch. And Cam Newton. So I went with 2013. That's, again, the year that Florida State played Malzahn and Auburn in the title. They averaged 328 yards a game on the ground, number one in the nation. They went 12-2 that year. They were a very good football team. They found ways to win when they had to pass, but that really wasn't their forte. But they were number one in the nation. They will run downhill with zone. They'll run some gap and some different things too when they want, but they run downhill with zone, pull it, run and throw off of it. It is straightforward. Where they get really creative with it is they'll do those same actions, same formations, and then they'll run a lot of different types of reverses, fake reverses, fly sweep, jet motion. They are annoying for anybody that's in the box, D lineman or linebacker, strong safety, because the eye candy is going everywhere. I covered UCF when he first got there for the first couple of years. They were really hard even for us, and we talked to guy. He's a great guy. They're really hard for anybody to follow on an individual play because of all the motions and shifts. They keep teams off balance. And I'll get to what they have right now with RJ Harvey in a second, but here are the numbers from 13 to 2020. These are just this Auburn stats. 255 yards, 13th in the nation, 2014. 2015, 196.4. That was 35th. 2016, 271.3. That was 6th. 2017, they were 26th with 218.3 yards on the ground. 2018, 167.5. That's 68th. 2019, 191. That's 33rd. 2020, 162.6. That's 67th. They like to run the ball. His staffs will always be run first unless something completely changes. Maybe if he had the perfect quarterback. Now, he did, this is important to note, they got Jarrett Stidham to transfer. I believe he was at A&M first. He came to Auburn in 2017, just pull out 1 year, 246, a 370, 66.5%, 31.58, 8.5 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Now, if you look at the 2017 numbers, they still ranked pretty good at 26 in the country. So they had a balanced offense. And they didn't have the defense they needed in terms of being consistent to win some of the close games. But that offense evolved. Out of all the years, if anybody's going to go back and look at film of Auburn, that's probably the year I would suggest. First time with a quarterback, so it's going to be that way this year with Florida State coming up in 25. But a talented one that can throw. He could run some, but like Kromenhoek, he's not going to just break ankles. Stidham was a good athlete, but he wasn't going to go out there and just kill it. To put it mildly, that's not that man's strength. I can pull up some stats for him rushing here, but I don't think there's any doubt that Stidham's best attribute was always his ability to throw the football. So in 2017, Jarrett Stidham, he ran 103 times for 153 yards, so about 1.5 yards, had 4 touchdowns. He would extend plays more than anything else. Solid. And if you want to think about him as a passer, he had a powerful arm. There's no doubt about that. And his ability to get the ball down the field was impressive. But I think it's interesting that if you really look at Stidham and all the things that he could do, Gus Malzahn knew he had to adapt. That season probably gives me the most clear-cut ability to say, okay, this is a guy that could make something happen, and Auburn is going to be in a good spot. I don't know for sure if Stidham's a guy that is really, how do I say this, that is really the perfect quarterback for Malzahn, but he's going to have to adapt if he's going to work with Mike Norvell. So, again, Stidham's numbers were 246, a 370, 66.5%, 31.58, 8.5 yards an attempt, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. So how did they develop the passing game under him? 2 things. Number one, for Gus's offense to work, they're going to need a slot and a flanker that can fly. At Auburn, they had a couple of those guys. Just to use an example, Ryan Davis, Darius Slayton, Will Hastings, those 3 guys all played a lot. Davis is the one that caught most of the screens. He had 84 catches, 815 yards, 9.7 because he caught so many screens. His average was lower, 5 touchdowns. They spread you horizontally, make you declare, making it easier for the quarterback to make a decision in the run game or the pass game. And, of course, RPO is involved with that as well. Darius Slayton, 29 catches, 645, 22.25 touchdowns. Will Hastings, 26 catches, 525 yards, 20.2 and 4 touchdowns. So they will run bubbles. They will run different kinds of screens. They'll do some trickeration. They'll throw flea flickers, double passes, things like that. But they want to go vertical on you. When Gus throws the ball, they want to hit big plays. They will be aggressive from the outset of games. They're not somebody that's going to sit back and wait. Third play of the game, if they go deep, you should not be surprised. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the evolution of Gus's offense and why it can work at Florida State. That is here at Locked On Seminoles. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel, the FanDuel Sportsbook app, because it gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and see all the way play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Let's talk a little bit about power football. The one thing that the RPO works best off of is the ability to run the football downhill, and that defensive end has to crash down, and then at the last second, the quarterback pulls it out of the belly of the running back and takes around the end. Or if they're running, acting like he's going to go outside, and just the opposite, he'll go up the middle. Gus's offenses do this at an elite level. It is the best thing that I think he does as a coach. Is teaching the ball fakes, how to carry it out, when to pull it, the exact place on the field you want to be when you do this, that, and the other. They were always ahead of things. And just, I'll give several different examples here, but 2017 for Auburn. Kerryon Johnson and Cam Martin were their two leading rushers. Kerryon averaged 4.9 yards a carry, 18 touchdowns, had 1,391 yards. This is in the SEC West. I mean, it doesn't get any tougher in terms of defensive linemen. Downhill, power football, zone inside. They'll run some gap or occasional toss sweep or something, but it is basically between the guards. We're coming right at you. We're going to knock you in the mouth, and we're going to see who's got the most talent. But off of that, if you really key on somebody like Kerryon or Cam Martin had 453 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 6 yards a carry. If you key on them too much, again, he will have a quarterback that can run. Doesn't have to be an unbelievable athlete to go get 40, 50 yards and create havoc, which is what Luke Kromenhoek does. I think Florida State will fit this very well. I mean, you got Cam Davis already on the roster. You got Sam Singleton, a guy that can really fly, but he's a good inside runner. Those two alone, just starting, and I'm not sure who else will come back, they should be in a pretty good spot. The running back room is not going to be Florida State's concern. It'll be the offensive line, and I'll talk about that more at the end of the show when I get into recruiting and the transfer portal. But this is a great fit from that perspective, and I know Norvell doesn't mind going up tempo, so the meeting of the minds there is really good. What is interesting is, like, even this year, like, UCF's not on the same level as Auburn in terms of how they recruited defense especially, but even offense, the offensive lines at Auburn, they had more talent, especially in his early tenure and up to 2017. But this year for UCF, I don't know if any of those guys will play in the NFL, but listen to the stats that R.J. Harvey put up. He's an Orlando native. He played in the city, so he came back home after transferring from Virginia. 232 carries, 1,577 yards, 6.8 yards per carry, 22 touchdowns. Over the last 2 seasons, RJ's got 38 touchdowns on the ground alone. This year, he had 20 catches, 267 yards, 13.4 and 3 scores. He is a monster. He's probably the most under-discussed player in the country that put up big numbers this year in a Power 4 conference. I don't know exactly why, but RJ probably didn't get the just due. He's a horse. He's 220 pounds, 230 pounds. He is a downhill runner, and he's a guy that has the power to break tackles, but he had good hands. Gus wants his running backs to catch. They will definitely run a lot of screens with them as well. It's not just the slot. It's not just the flanker and occasionally the boundary. He will throw the football to guys all over the place if they can make guys miss in space and or, like RJ, just run them over. He's a lot of fun to watch. So he's adapted in many ways with his quarterbacks, but traditionally speaking, his running back's going to be more like a Cam Davis. If you think about historically, 5'11", 210 plus, has power, has some speed, can catch the football. I think Cam Davis is the biggest winner out of Gus Malzahn heading to Florida State because he's like the prototypical running back for them. If Rodell comes back, same kind of deal. They're very similarly built. Florida State's in a good spot there, and then Sam could be the guy that you utilize a little bit of both. And don't forget about Mekhi Danzig, the freshman running back. He's one of the fastest players in college football. 45.99 in the 400 meters is ridiculous. That's what he ran in high school. They'll find a way to use him too. Wouldn't be surprised if he was in the slot. They're going to have different ways, like Jalen Lucas, another guy that he'll be coming back next year. They have all these different gadget kind of players they can run jet sweeps and motions with. That fits Gus Malzahn very, very well. Now, I do have a couple of questions. These are very important before I get into discussing the transfer portal and the recruiting aspect, which is, to me, the most fascinating part of the whole Gus Malzahn situation. But before I get to that, these are the three questions that I need to know. Will Malzahn and Norvell truly get along? And what I mean by that is the following: who plays, what spots, game plan, especially for big games. If Gus wants to run it more than Norvell, hypothetically, or vice versa, how do they get along? These are guys that are used to being head coaches. It's been a long time since Gus has taken orders from somebody else. How is that going to work? I have no idea. This is a very unique scenario, and one that, Chip Kelly just did it. He was at UCLA and he went to Ohio State, but he coached Ryan Day. This is a little different to me because literally Ryan Day was his pupil at one point, so they've been friends a long time. I don't know what Malzahn's relationship is with Norvell, but they've coached in some similar areas, and like most coaches in the South and the football community in general, they mostly know each other. You listen to podcasts like you listen to Urban Meyer on his triple option pod. You mentioned a person on that show, like one of the other guys, he knows that coach and he'll bring up a story. That's common. But how did they come about to, hey, let's try this. Let's go with this. It's fascinating to me, and your guess is as good as mine, and it's the biggest one. The game planning, which players play, is huge, especially when you're going up against Florida, against Miami, against Clemson. Anybody that has similar talent that is a peer, that's a problem if you're not on the same page. We'll see if that works. 2, this is just something that's blatant, so I'm just going to say it. How do Gus, Mike, and whoever else is on the Florida State staff, and that includes the back office, fix the dilemma that is the offensive line, if you want to call it that, at Florida State, considering the following is going to take place? They're going to lose several players from graduation. They don't have good depth from the high school ranks from their freshman, sophomore, and junior classes that have played much. Like Jalen Early, he got banged up some this year. He seems like he's going to be a pretty good player. But besides him, who is definitively somebody you think is going to be good? Is Andre Otto? Is it going to be Lucas? I mean, nobody knows. Luke Simmons, nobody knows for sure. And before anybody asks, this is, even if you're Georgia and you're in this spot, the portal is not where you win with O-line. It is terrible every year because for whatever reason, most offensive linemen do not go into the portal, even if they're struggling or they're not going to play. I know one of them personally at his school. He's never going to play, but he just wants to be there. O-linemen are a little different. Florida State has a massive dilemma at offensive line. I don't think it's going to get fixed very quick, but they got to come up with something because they could have just as bad or even a worse offensive line next year, if that's possible. I'm not kidding. So they have to figure that out. Number 3, he's a great person. I know Gus from when I covered him at UCF. Won't meet a nicer guy. And his wife, Christy, is awesome. Their family's great. He's a religious man. He'll fit into Tallahassee well in North Florida, being a religious guy especially. But how do they help the Florida State roster have more cohesiveness as a family, as a coach, etc.? That's an interesting aspect to think about because obviously Florida State was not cohesive this year. And I'm being kind. The portal, NIL, all the changes, the ACC situation, the house settlement that's getting ready to happen this next year. I think it's going to be around $22 million that athletic departments are going to get. SEC schools, I remember somebody saying on a recent pod, like 14, 15 million is going to go towards that on average. There'll be schools that spend more in some way, but how does Florida State handle all that, and how can Gus help Florida State rebound quicker than what I think or anybody else does? Because they figure out one guy here or there they spend money on, or they get them to buy in more. There's so many avenues. I couldn't even list them all, but Gus has got a ton of experience. There are going to be ways that he can help. And I also think that because of his experience and all the people that he knows, he's going to be able to help Florida State probably add a few guys to the coaching staff, the portal, and recruiting. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Have you downloaded the Gametime app yet? If you have not, you're missing out on an opportunity to get great opportunities for basketball tickets, football tickets, a play, going to an opera, going to just about anything you could imagine. You can find it on the Gametime app, and best, it's right there on your phone at your fingertips. For me, one of the things that I really like about it is inclusive pricing. There's a toggle switch inside the app that you turn on, and so when you click on a seat, the price that you see is the end price. It's not that front price, and then they tag 28 different things. All you got to do, again, is turn on that toggle switch, and you get the inclusive pricing up front, so you're not getting any surprises at the end. Also, just something that I really like, you can see the seat when you click on a ticket right there from your phone. And finally, if you're looking for something just kind of outside the box, Gametime Picks is pretty cool as well. Filters out all the fluff, so it has deals on all kinds of things. If you're just looking for things in general, great seat opportunities, last-minute ticket deals, right there on the app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Gus Malzahn has a massive network that he has developed. He was a coach in Arkansas as a high school coach for a while, ended up helping out at the University of Arkansas. He's been at Arkansas State. He's been at Auburn. He's been at UCF. 20 plus years of coaching would get you that, but he's been in the business more than that. He's been a teacher. He's been a guy that's, a mentor. I can only imagine how vast his coaching network is and how many text messages Gus has sent in the last, let's say, 3 hours, just since he got up. It's almost noon Eastern time as I'm getting ready to finish this podcast. The day after the news broke about Malzahn going to Florida State, I bet he's got 20 text messages out to coaches. Who do you think I should hire? Would you be interested? Where are you? What do you think about this guy? Do you think I made the right decision? The information stream on his phone right now would be fascinating. You could write a book on it and not be done. Now I'm talking about like an 800-page book. It would be fascinating. But that also directly impacts Florida State, not only short-term, but long-term. He can leave an impact on the athletic department. Let's say Norvell is there 5 more years. I don't know. And Gus is his OC for 5 years, and Gus retires after that. He's going to help build stability in the program because you got to get the right people in place to win. There's a book that I read when I was in grad school called Good to Great. It's a business book. The key to it was one paragraph in the whole book. Get the right people on the bus. Get the wrong people off the bus, and then put the right people in the right places. Gus, especially, I think part 3 of that will be good. There might be some reshuffling in the back office. There might be people that are on staff now that might change their role or expand it in some way, shape, or form. And of course, there will be people that are let go in some capacity because he'll want some of his people probably brought in. It's fascinating to me. I think that there's a chance of at least 1 or more guys coming from UCF. Herb Hand would be a possibility, for example. He was the offensive line coach. He was with him at Auburn. He's been at Texas. He's at UCF now. He's a power run guy. They know the system. So that would be a plug and play. That's very possible. Herb's a great guy. I'm very, very interested to see who else he might bring. And again, this isn't just the coaching positions. Back office matters too. Florida State's recruiting operation needs to be overhauled in some way, shape, or form. It has to improve, and it needs to improve now. So maybe there's somebody from the office that he brings in to help the Noles. I have no idea, but I would imagine that's going to be discussed. Now let's talk specifics with recruiting and the transfer portal to wrap up. Number 1, when he was at Auburn, he always recruited Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia the hardest. They would hit Florida in spots in South Florida. I'll talk about that in a sec, but mostly they wanted to hit the states right there, the deep South, and they did a really good job. If you're going to look at it from a perspective of which guys they're going to try to get, like from where, I think the number one thing, if you could say, which city, Brian, do you think he'll help Florida State the most? And this is, it's such a big city. It's hard to pick one area. There's multiple counties, but the greater metro area of Atlanta. There's no doubt about it. Brown, the big defensive tackle that's with Carolina, he got hurt this year, but had 103 tackles last season. He was a kid that was out of Lanier High School in Buford, just northeast of Atlanta. He was the number 6 player in the country, I believe it was, for 247 in 2016 class. Final four were Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia, Bama. When you're beating those other 3 schools and you're Auburn, no offense to Auburn, but they're not on the same level as Georgia and Alabama from a recruiting perspective. And Tennessee, I mean, they were obviously trying to buy kids forever. They were all involved. He got that kid. Derek Brown's one of the best defensive tackles I've seen in the last 10 years. Elite player. Gus will focus on Atlanta area a lot, some of the big county schools all throughout Georgia. He wants wholesome blue-collar players, which fits Florida State to a T. He also wants size and talent on D-line. D-line and speed, just in general, on all of what I'm saying, is what he will focus on, if you go by his history. I have studied Gus exclusively when I covered UCF. He's a great guy, and I think he can relate to kids in the Deep South very, very well because he's one of them. He will be successful in houses with the Florida State name on his shirt because of his experience. Everybody knows who he is. He'll help Florida State. He'll get them involved with coaches and 7-on-7 coaches, etc., that UCF just didn't have the same power, but they still had a lot of success recruiting Georgia and even Alabama. At UCF, they beat some kids, beat teams on kids out of there like they were SEC programs. Now with the Florida State moniker, no offense to UCF, it's a little easier. I think that's going to be very unique. The question everybody's going to want to know is how quickly can he help the turnaround? I don't know for sure. Part of that's going to still be NIL. That's the unknown in the room forever. It's a little more difficult to project recruiting, and I don't know under the current circumstances how much the NIL package is going to be good, bad, or indifferent with the Florida State boosters. I simply don't. But Gus Malzahn will get you in the door. That's the bottom line. If you're not in the conversation, you're not signing a player. So, or players as it may be from a particular school, Buford, IMG, whatever. Now, as it relates to the state of Florida, it will no doubt be a lot easier because especially in North Florida, battles with UF and Jacksonville or a kid from Pensacola, etc. I expect Florida State to have a little more success because of Gus as well. He's well known in those areas. He's given speeches at high schools, coaches all through that area, South Alabama, South Georgia, Thomas County Central. Those schools all know Gus. He will help them beat the Gators, beat Georgia, etc. for some of those kids. Where it gets really interesting is whether or not they're going to be able to get that extra sprinkle. And I don't know about this because it depends on what Florida State wants to do, but they need to be more successful in Tampa, to Orlando, to the Space Coast, to like Cocoa, on I-4 corridor and over that way to the east coast of Florida. Florida State hasn't done as well as they should in the last 5 years under Norvell. In the secondary part of that, Malzahn always recruited South Florida fairly well. They'd get 1 or 2 key players. I believe Sean White, one of his quarterbacks for Auburn, this is an example, is from down there. There are plenty of examples where you can get good players down there. It doesn't always have to be a 5-star and impact your program. And Florida State historically has done very well recruiting Broward, Palm Beach, and Dade. If they do not, you're going to be losing some of those players to UF, to Miami, to Georgia, teams that you aspire to beat in a regular season game or a bowl game. So that's important too. I think he'll help in that regard. He's got plenty of connections. And again, his ability to draw coaches and give advice on how to fill out this staff will be important. They might even get a recruiter that has a strong tie, I don't know, to one of the key programs like Chaminade Madonna or St. Thomas Aquinas or American Heritage, Miami Central, Miami Norland, whatever it may be in South Florida. If they have that, and you just add 2 more players a year and you just up your game, like 2 more players from the North Florida to Georgia area, that's 4 more good players you get every single year. You can change your roster in a hurry because we're talking about, getting an extra defensive tackle, an extra speed receiver, an offensive tackle, whatever it is. Florida State can improve their program pretty good. Now the transfer portal. When he was at UCF, no question. Gus Malzahn focused on it. He didn't get as many of the elite high school kids as he wanted, so they were pretty balanced, pretty close to 50-50, portal and high school. It's not going to be quite that. I think moving forward, Florida State after year 1, this first year it might be a little more heavy portal because it's such a tumultuous time. But beginning after this year, 1 year from now, I think it'll be more balanced. I'm fascinated with Florida State 2025 recruiting class, how it finishes. But the 26 class could be totally different. That could be a bonanza, if you will, because they're going to have a lot of scholarships to offer. But for the portal right now, Malzahn, I already had people ask me last night in the live chat for the UF Florida State game live chat, hey, which guys is he going to bring from UCF? I have no idea. But to sit here and think that at least a couple of them don't follow Malzahn is probably stupid. There's going to be somebody, whether it's a grad student, whether it's a freshman. I have no idea. That's likely. But here's what's much more important, and many people probably don't realize. The way the portal works most often, let's say you miss out on a kid out of high school or a junior college kid, whatever it is. They go to school X, you don't get them. Year 1, year 2 doesn't work out, they transfer. If you have a relationship with the high school coach, which Gus knows about every coach in the South, it seems like, and you have a relationship with 7-on coaches, and they did a tremendous job of getting 7-on teams to come to UCF after the big 7-on tournaments. I was with some of those teams on campus at UCF. They did a phenomenal job of it. You'll get the rebound. You can do that at Florida State too. To be honest, Norvell did a pretty good job, mega camps, different things, getting kids involved, underclassmen. He's done a good job with that too. It's probably his best aspect as a recruiter, in my opinion, is the early evaluations and doing his own. And I think they'll get some kids that maybe they went to South Carolina. Maybe they went to NC State. Maybe they went to LSU that were from Georgia, Alabama, Florida, and they come to Florida State after it didn't work out somewhere else. Malzahn's going to have relationships with kids that, for whatever reason, Norvell did not. He's expanding the board. So for that reason, I think it really helps short term. Florida State's going to do a little better in the portal. Relationships, relationships, relationships. It never changes in any form of recruiting. High school, junior college, or the portal. People pick coaches, not schools, as a rule. There are exceptions, but as a rule, it will be the jersey that is coming into your house and it'll catch your attention, or the polo, but it's the person wearing it. Urban Meyer sold Florida better than most of the other coaches. Why? It was Urban Meyer. Bobby Bowden sold Florida State better than most coaches. Why? It was Bobby Bowden. Jimmy Johnson sold Miami better than most coaches. Why? It's Jimmy Johnson. It's about the coach. Malzahn's an easy guy to get along with. He's got relationships all over the place. Do not be surprised if Florida State ends up getting a few players. You're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I'm telling you right now, this is a guy that has relationship building qualities, and he's easy to get along with. People in the media liked him. He's friendly. He's about as basic an A to B person to have a private conversation with as you can imagine. I hope he has a lot of success at Florida State again. It's always nice to see one of the good guys get a chance, and I think this is a unique move. Good for Gus, good for Norvell, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. You can find me on X at FBScout_Florida. That's on X at FBScout_Florida. And please hit that like button, that notification bell. And if you have not, especially hit that subscription. I truly appreciate it. I'd love for you to also share this podcast so I can get in front of more Noles fans. Finally, comment. What do you think about Gus? What are you curious about? I might do another podcast. If you drop some cool questions, I might do a pod, even if it's a 10-minute one, just on the questions that I get in the chat. I'm going to have a live chat later this week, probably. I'm guessing there's going to be some recruiting stuff to discuss on Wednesday. It's National Signing Day. Definitely going to have that coming up. So everything's coming in front. Please ask the questions, and I will get back to you. Everybody have a good one. Take care.